In the early days of this new year, the scriptures during the week are focusing on behavior. Behavior we should reflect upon so that as we begin this new year, we won't let certain behaviors get in the way of building a stronger community, of being closer to Christ, to being a more authentic witness of His love. And some of these challenges kind of hit all of us probably in between the eyes, because I suspect all of us are guilty of some of these things. It's just the nature of being a human person and living together as a family in a larger community. But Jesus doesn't want to let us off the hook. He wants us to be honest. You know, yesterday the scriptures focused on the reality of complaining. You know, and we all complain, and we probably know some people in our life who are really good at that. But how do we not get caught in that negative web of constantly criticizing others? And today, we're asked to look at two kinds of behavior that can really get in the way, particularly for those of us that are involved in a church. One is the role of law in our lives, and the other is the tendency to judge others. Now, the law, you know, we have to have laws. We have to have laws that govern, in general, how we deal with one another, the ways in which we see our day and the issues that come before us. And Jewish people had quite a list of laws that guided almost every conceivable action. And these laws governed all of their behavior from the moment they got up in the morning to the last moments before they fell asleep. There was a law somewhere that told you what you were supposed to do and what you were not supposed to do. But what happened, of course, is people get caught up in the letter of the law, and they begin to live in the world of laws. And then they forget that ultimately God is calling us to love one another. And sometimes, while a strict interpretation of a particular law might be okay with a lawyer in mind, it would not be okay in terms of being a follower of the Lord. You know, those of us who are older might remember a period in the church where we had a lot of laws regarding fasting and abstinence. You know, on Fridays we were to abstain from meat, and then there were these fasting laws. You had to fast from midnight to the time you went to communion. And those were general laws to help us appreciate God's love, and that by sacrificing, we are aware of the sacrifices we're called to. But some people would get so obsessed with these laws that they would really get sick, you know. Somebody coming home from the hospital and the doctor saying, you know, you have to have 3 meals to get your strength back. But it's a Friday in Lent and I can't eat anything. So sometimes common sense got in the way of the interpretation of the law. How do laws guide our behavior, but that we know that ultimately we're called to love one another? And sometimes we need to stop worrying about a certain law because of the greater need of a person in front of us. Which leads to the other tendency, particularly in churches, is to judge. You know, we judge people all the time. All day long we're making judgments. How a person's dressed, the manner in which they speak, how they behave publicly, what seems to be their priorities. And you know, sometimes that gets in the way, that constant judging. You know, we live in a society, judge, 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 judge. And Jesus is telling us today to let go of that, to stop judging one another and love one another instead. You know, like in church, sometimes I know someone will come up and I can't believe how that person was dressed, or the way a person parents. You know, one day this woman was all upset because these 2 little children were having a bad day. And so I asked her, are you a mother? And she said, well, of course I'm a mother. I said, well, kids have bad days, you know. Sometimes we have to remember that every kid has a bad day, and that's part of life. It has nothing to do with whether the person is a good parent or not. Sometimes we can judge people, you know, in terms of how they speak All we need to do is let go of all that and allow the law of love to govern how we deal with one another. So as we begin this new year, how can I be a more loving person? How can I make sure that my priorities are in the right place? Where do I need to challenge myself? Maybe I'm too hard on somebody in my life right now, or I'm holding people up to a higher standard that's realistic or honest. By challenging ourselves, we become more and more Christ-like. Because as we hear in the gospel today, Jesus was the Lord even of the Sabbath. He was the Lord of all things. And if he's telling us sometimes we need to chill out, sometimes we need to be more patient, more merciful, I think that's good advice for us as we continue our journey to be a more authentic follower of the Lord.
Thank you for joining us for the celebration of the Mass today. It's a blessing that you are with us. Every broadcast of this liturgy goes out to hundreds of people and hundreds of people all over the world. It's been an enormous blessing. If you'd like to support this virtual ministry of OLPH, please go to our website. You can support this ministry by going to Give Central so that we can continue to broadcast the liturgy each and every week. Thank you for your support. Most of all, thank you for joining us today. God bless you. Greetings from OLPH.